Have you ever woken up with that quiet dread, the weight of expectations, the nagging voice in your head telling you you're not enough? Or maybe you've felt the exhaustion of chasing perfection, only to find that peace slips through your fingers no matter how hard you try. You're not alone. In a world that never stops moving, inner peace can feel like a distant dream. But what if the answer wasn't about doing more, but about seeing differently? 2,000 years ago, the Stoics offered a path, and it's just as relevant today. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, put it simply: accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. That's the essence of self-acceptance, not resignation, but a profound clarity that unlocks peace. This video is about building that unshakable calm through Stoic wisdom. It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending life is perfect. It's about tools like the dichotomy of control, separating what's in your hands from what isn't, so you stop wasting energy on the uncontrollable. It's about Amor Fati, the radical practice of loving your fate, even when it's not what you planned. And it's about mindfulness, not as a trendy buzzword, but as the Stoics practiced it, a way to observe your thoughts without letting them hijack your peace. These aren't just ideas, they're lifelines for anyone drowning in the noise of modern life. Imagine a life where you're no longer tossed by every storm, where setbacks don't shatter you and other people's opinions don't dictate your worth. That's the promise of Stoicism. It's not magic, it's a shift in perspective, one that's been tested by time, from ancient Rome to today's chaos. Over the next minutes, we'll walk through these principles together, not as abstract philosophy, but as daily practices. You'll leave with a clearer mind, a lighter heart, and the tools to find peace not someday, but right now, exactly where you are. Let's begin. Inner peace in Stoicism isn't about retreating from life or numbing yourself to its challenges. It's the opposite: an active, courageous clarity that comes from working with reality, not against it. The Stoics called this ataraxia, a serene state where your mind isn't tossed by every external event. Think of it like standing in the eye of a hurricane. Chaos swirls around you, but you remain steady. Not because you've escaped the storm, but because you've learned to anchor yourself in what's real. Here's the key distinction. Modern culture often sells peace as passive checking out, scrolling endlessly, or pretending problems don't exist. Stoicism rejects that. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's greatest teachers, put it bluntly: happiness and freedom begin with understanding one principle: some things are within our control, and some things are not. Inner peace isn't found by ignoring what's outside your control. It's found by focusing relentlessly on what is: your choices, your reactions, your values. Picture two people stuck in traffic. One white-knuckles the wheel, raging at every red light, as if their anger could magically clear the road. The other accepts the delay, uses the time to listen to an audiobook, or simply observes their breath. Both face the same external event, but only one experiences peace. That's the Stoic difference. It's not about changing the world, it's about changing your relationship to it. This is where most people get stuck. We confuse control with influence. You can't control the weather, but you can carry an umbrella. You can't control others' opinions, but you can choose not to let them define you. Stoicism trains you to invest your energy where it actually matters, your judgments and actions, while letting go of the illusion that you should command everything else. When you stop fighting reality, you find a quiet strength, the kind that stays unshaken even when life refuses to go your way. And here's the unexpected truth: this clarity doesn't make you passive. It fuels action. Imagine a surgeon performing a high-stakes operation. Their hands don't shake because they've accepted the gravity of the moment. not panicked about it, but fully present. That's Stoic peace, not the absence of challenge, but the presence of unwavering focus. It's the reason Marcus Aurelius could lead an empire through war and plague while writing meditations on tranquility. He wasn't ignoring the chaos, he was navigating it with a mind trained to see clearly. So ask yourself, where are you spending your mental energy, on things you can't change or on the choices you can? That shift in attention from frustration to agency is where inner peace begins, not as a distant ideal, but as a daily practice, one traffic jam, one criticism, one setback at a time. The Stoic dichotomy of control is like learning to separate the wind from the sail. You can't control the wind, but you can always adjust your sails. Seneca, the great Roman philosopher, illustrated this with the archer's dilemma. An archer can control how carefully they aim, the strength of their pull, even the steadiness of their hand. But once the arrow leaves the bow, the wind, a sudden movement of the target, even the arrow snapping mid-flight, none of that is in their hands. The Stoic archer's job isn't to guarantee a hit, it's to shoot skillfully and accept whatever follows with equanimity. That's the heart of the dichotomy, pouring your energy into what you can influence, while releasing your grip on what you can't. This is where self-acceptance meets action. Too often, we torture ourselves over outcomes we couldn't possibly dictate, whether a job offer comes through, how a friend responds to our advice, even whether it rains on our wedding day. We confuse influence with control, and in doing so, tie our peace to variables that were never ours to command. The Stoics ask, why chain your happiness to things that could vanish in an instant? Real freedom comes when you stop demanding that life obey you and start focusing on how you respond to life. Think of it like gardening. You choose the seeds, water them diligently, ensure they get sunlight. But you can't force them to sprout. Obsessing over the weather or the soil's mood won't make the plants grow faster, it'll just drain the joy from the process. Yet how much of our stress comes from doing exactly that, fretting over delayed flights, others' opinions, or past mistakes we can't undo? We act like anxious gardeners yelling at the sky, as if our worry could change the rain. Here's a practical challenge. Grab a sheet of paper and draw 2 columns. Label one within my control, the other outside my control. Now list your top 3 stressors this week. Did you write my boss's temper or traffic delays in the first column? That's the misclassification Stoicism warns against. Reassign them. Feel the relief when you realize, I don't have to fix what isn't mine to fix. This isn't passivity, it's precision. The archer doesn't stop aiming because they can't control the wind. They aim better, knowing the rest is circumstance. Marcus Aurelius framed this as waking up each morning and telling yourself, today I'll meet interference, ingratitude, and chaos, but none of it can touch my choice to act with integrity. That's the shift. Peace isn't the absence of chaos, it's the presence of clarity about where your power truly lies. When you stop wasting effort on the uncontrollable, you free up reserves for what matters, your courage, your kindness, your next step forward. The arrow may land where it will, but the aim, that's always yours. Amor Fati, Latin for love of fate, isn't about blind optimism or pretending life's hardships don't hurt. It's about recognizing that every twist, even the painful ones, shapes who you're meant to become. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who famously embraced this Stoic concept, called it my formula for greatness in a human being. To him, Amor Fati wasn't passive acceptance. It was a fiery, creative embrace of life's messiness. He wrote, I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. Then I shall be one of those who make things beautiful. Imagine that, transforming adversity into artistry, not by denying its weight, but by alchemizing it into strength. Marcus Aurelius lived this daily. His private journals, now known as meditations, are filled with reminders to turn obstacles into fuel. When a rival undermined him, he didn't dwell on the betrayal. He asked, "What does this demand of my character?" When plague ravaged Rome, he didn't despair over the uncontrollable. He focused on the compassion he could show. His entries read like a manual for resilience. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's the core of Ammer Fati, not just enduring fate but partnering with it. Now apply this to modern stumbles. Losing a job feels like the floor vanishing beneath you. But what if it's the nudge you needed to pivot toward work that truly aligns with your values? Rejection stings, but could it be redirecting you to a path with fewer compromises? Even failure, that universal fear, becomes a teacher when you stop resisting its lessons. The Stoics knew resistance magnifies pain, acceptance unlocks growth. Here's a practice. Think of a recent setback, a missed opportunity, a harsh critique, a plan that unraveled. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" try asking, "What can this reveal about my next step?" A musician who loses hearing doesn't curse the silence. They learn to compose in their mind, like Beethoven. A runner with a broken leg doesn't abandon the race. They study strategy, like the coach they'll later become. Amor Fati is the art of finding the hidden door in every dead end. This isn't about slapping a silver lining on suffering. It's about recognizing that life's sharpest edges often carve out our deepest capacities. The oak tree doesn't resent the wind that bends it. That tension is what makes its roots grip the earth harder. So next time fate hands you something you didn't ask for, ask yourself, how could this, against all odds, be the very thing I needed? The answer might not come immediately. But the question itself, that's where the alchemy begins. Self-worth in Stoicism doesn't come from applause, promotions, or the ever-shifting opinions of others. It grows from something far more enduring: virtue. The Stoics named 4 pillars: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, not as abstract ideals, but as daily practices that root your confidence in something unshakable. Seneca put it plainly: true happiness is agreeing with your own nature, not your job title, your social media likes, or the boxes you've checked for others. Your nature. Imagine a tree in a forest. It doesn't strain to mimic the branches of its neighbors or apologize for its height. It grows toward the light it's given, and in doing so, becomes exactly what it's meant to be. That's self-acceptance in action, not measured against external benchmarks, but aligned with the integrity of your own growth. Society sells validation like a drug. Chase the next achievement, the next compliment, the next proof you're enough. But Stoicism flips the script. Wisdom isn't about collecting degrees. It's about questioning your assumptions and seeing reality clearly. Courage isn't performative bravery. It's showing up authentically even when it costs you approval. Justice isn't grand gestures. It's treating every interaction with fairness, starting with how you treat yourself. Temperance isn't deprivation. It's the freedom of not being enslaved by cravings for more. These virtues aren't just moral compass points, they're the foundation of unshakable self-worth. Consider the difference between a statue and a tree. A statue's value depends on others chiseling it, polishing it, declaring it beautiful. A tree, it's valuable simply because it's alive, because it fulfills its purpose, sheltering, bearing fruit, turning sunlight into substance. Too many of us live like statues, waiting for external hands to carve our worth. Stoicism invites you to live like the tree. Your value isn't contingent on someone else's gaze. It's inherent in your capacity to grow, to persevere, to act with virtue regardless of whether anyone notices. This shifts the entire narrative of self-doubt. When you measure yourself against Stoic virtues, you're not asking, "Did I succeed?" but did I act with integrity? Not did they like me, but did I show up with honesty and kindness? The first question ties your worth to outcomes you can't control. The second anchors it to choices you always control. That's the liberation Seneca speaks of. Agreeing with your nature means stopping the futile chase for external validation and starting the deeper work of living by your own principles. Think of a time you compromised your values to fit in or win approval. How did it feel in the moment, and more importantly, how did it feel afterward? Contrast that with a time you stood firm in your convictions, even at a cost. There's a quiet strength in the latter, a dignity that no amount of external praise can replicate. That's the Stoic secret. Self-acceptance isn't about feeling good all the time. It's about knowing you're living in harmony with what's truest in you. The tree doesn't need the forest to applaud when it grows anyway, and so can you. Epictetus cut to the heart of it centuries ago. It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. That single sentence holds the key to the Stoic discipline of perception, the art of filtering raw experience through the lens of reason before it becomes emotion. Imagine your mind as a courtroom. Every external event, a delayed flight, a harsh email, even a spilled coffee enters as evidence. But here's the power: you serve as both witness and judge. The Stoics teach that between what happens and how you feel lies a critical space, the space where you assign meaning. Master that, and you master your peace. Take something as mundane as traffic. Two drivers sit bumper to bumper in the same gridlock. One white-knuckles the wheel, muttering about wasted time, letting frustration hijack their morning. The other breathes deeply, listens to a podcast, or uses the pause to mentally rehearse their upcoming meeting. Same external event, wildly different internal experiences. The difference: perception. The Stoic asks, is this delay truly harmful, or have I decided it is? They recognize that the jam itself isn't the problem. The suffering comes from the story they layer on top. This ruins everything versus this changes nothing essential. Criticism follows the same pattern. A colleague dismisses your idea in a meeting. You could spiral into self-doubt, replaying their words on loop. Or you could engage in a perception check, Stoic reasoning in action. Is their feedback valid? If yes, it's a gift. If not, why let their opinion weigh more than your own? Even harsh words become mere data when you strip away the emotional charge. Marcus Aurelius modeled this daily. When senators mocked him, he didn't retaliate or crumble. He asked, does their judgment alter the truth of who I am? The answer always was no. Here's a practice to train this muscle: the 3-second pause before reacting to any provocation. A rude comment, a missed deadline creates space. In those seconds, ask, what's actually happening here? What's within my control? What meaning am I assigning to this? You'll start catching yourself mid-story, realizing how often you've conflated events with catastrophes. A flat tire isn't a disaster, it's rubber and air. The disaster is the script you add. Now my whole day is ruined. Stoicism teaches you to edit that script. Think of perception like adjusting a camera's focus. Blurred, a shadow looks like a threat. Sharpened, it's just a tree branch swaying. The discipline lies in twisting that lens deliberately, not to pretend difficulties don't exist, but to see them clearly without distortion. When Epictetus said, men are disturbed not by things but by the views they take of them, he handed you the lens. The world will keep throwing events your way. Your power lies in choosing how to develop them. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for publication. Those pages were his private training ground, a nightly ritual where the most powerful man in Rome examined his own mind with ruthless honesty. That's the heart of Stoic journaling, not crafting pretty prose for an audience, but confronting yourself on paper. His entries weren't polished essays, they were raw, repetitive, sometimes messy. Today I fought anger when my advisor interrupted me. Why? Because I still crave undue respect. No fluff, no excuses, just a mirror held up to his own contradictions. That's the model. Your journal isn't a performance. It's a workshop where you dismantle the illusions that steal your peace. Start with 2 simple prompts, the same ones Marcus likely asked himself. What did I try to control today that wasn't mine to command? Where did I resist reality instead of working with it? Maybe you caught yourself obsessing over a coworker's tone, as if replaying their words could rewrite the past. Or perhaps you wasted energy resenting the rain, like a sailor cursing the wind instead of adjusting the sails. The magic lies in the specificity. Don't settle for "I was stressed." Dig deeper. I stressed myself by believing traffic should conform to my schedule. That shift from passive victim to active observer is where growth begins. Research backs this practice. A study from the University of Rochester found that expressive writing, just 15 minutes a day, reduces stress by helping the brain process chaos into coherence. Neurologically, it's like hitting the defragment button on your mental hard drive. But Stoic journaling adds a crucial layer. It's not just venting emotions, but interrogating them. When you write, "I felt hurt by their comment," follow it with, "Why? What story am I telling myself about what their opinion means?" You're not just describing storms, you're learning to navigate them. Consistency beats eloquence every time. Seneca compared daily reflection to sharpening a blade. Small, regular strokes keep it ready for life's battles. Your journal might be a leather-bound notebook or voice memos on your phone. The medium doesn't matter, the habit does. Think of it as mental hygiene. You wouldn't skip brushing your teeth because you're too busy, yet we often neglect the clutter in our minds. Set a trigger after your morning coffee, during your commute, right before bed. Tie it to an existing routine so it sticks. Marcus's journals reveal a man constantly course-correcting. One entry might dissect his anger, another his pride in enduring discomfort. He didn't wait for epiphanies, he hunted them daily. Try this tonight. Recount one moment where you conflated preference with need. Maybe you treated Wi-Fi going down like a life or death crisis, or acted as if your happiness depended on someone returning your text. That's the Stoic pivot, spotting where you turned a want into a demand, then gently returning it to its proper place. Nice to have, but not essential. The more you practice this, the quieter the storm becomes. Not because the world changes, but because you stop mistaking gusts for earthquakes. The page never judges. It's the one place you can admit, "I acted foolishly," without shame, because the goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Marcus didn't berate himself for his flaws. He noted them like a scientist tracking data. "I did this today, next time I'll try that." No drama, just progress. So grab whatever's closest, a napkin, your notes app, and start with one sentence. No grand insights required, just the truth, however small. That's how you build the habit, not by writing volumes, but by showing up day after day, as honestly as a philosopher emperor scribbling by candlelight. Negative visualization sounds counterintuitive. Why would anyone willingly imagine disaster? Yet the Stoics called this practice premeditatio malorum, Latin for the premeditation of evils, and considered it a cornerstone of resilience. Seneca urged his students to periodically rehearse poverty by eating simple meals, wearing plain clothes, or sleeping on the floor. Not to punish themselves, but to confront a liberating truth: you can endure far more than you fear. By mentally walking through worst-case scenarios, losing a job, facing illness, even death, you strip those shadows of their power. The monster under the bed shrinks when you turn on the light. Think of it like an emotional fire drill. When firefighters train, they don't just read manuals, they simulate smoke-filled rooms and collapsing floors. By the time real flames erupt, their bodies know the motions. Negative visualization works the same way. A business owner imagining bankruptcy isn't inviting disaster, they're inoculating themselves against panic. They ask, what would I actually do? Maybe pivot to consulting, downsize their home, or lean on community. The scenario loses its fangs when you realize you'd still have agency. But here's where modern Stoicism differs from pop psychology's positive thinking. This isn't about catastrophizing or dwelling on doom. It's a controlled exercise, brief, deliberate, and always paired with gratitude. Marcus Aurelius would bookend these reflections by listing comforts he often took for granted. This warm cloak, fresh bread from the oven, my child's laughter. That's the balance, touching the void, then returning to the present with sharper appreciation. Like a traveler who spends a week without running water only to marvel at their next hot shower. Seneca tested this firsthand. When exiled to Corsica, a barren island far from Rome's splendor, he wrote letters detailing how he found joy in stargazing and wild herbs. Later, when recalled to wealth, he kept a poverty day each month, writing, I measure my riches not by what I own, but by what I can cheerfully do without. That's the alchemy of negative visualization. By rehearsing loss, you dissolve its threat, leaving gratitude in its place. A practical way to try this tonight. As you lie in bed, pause before sleep. Picture one thing you deeply cherish: your health, a relationship, your home. Now imagine it's gone. Sit with that hollow feeling for just 10 seconds. Then exhale and open your eyes. Notice how the room feels softer, the sheets warmer. That's the Stoic Reset. You haven't summoned misfortune. You've unveiled the ordinary magic you'd overlooked. The caution lies in dosage. Like salt in a stew, a pinch of negative visualization enhances flavor. A handful ruins the meal. The goal isn't to obsess over disaster, but to touch it lightly long enough to appreciate its opposite. Epictetus framed it as the art of knowing what to overlook. You acknowledge life's fragility, not to live in fear, but to stop wasting the abundance already in your hands. After all, the storm you prepare for may never come, but the peace you cultivate, that's yours to keep. Marcus Aurelius had a habit of mentally rising above the noise, what Stoics call the view from above. Picture floating high above the earth until cities shrink to dots, oceans become thin blue lines, and your personal worries seem impossibly small. That's not escapism, it's a recalibration. In his journals, he'd write reminders like, think of the vastness of time and space, how your struggles are but specks in the grand sweep. This wasn't meant to dismiss human experience, but to put it in perspective. When you're stuck in traffic or stewing over a rude comment, the view from above asks, in the arc of your life, or even this week, will this truly matter? The power lies in the contrast. That coworker who took credit for your idea. From ground level, it feels like a betrayal. From 10,000 feet, it's a fleeting ripple in your shared humanity. The Stoics used this practice not to numb emotions, but to distinguish real harm from imagined slights. Epictetus offered a litmus test. Ask yourself, is this something within my control? If not, what's the cost of carrying it? The view from above reveals how often we confuse inconvenience with catastrophe. A missed train isn't a tragedy, it's a change of plans. A harsh word isn't a wound, it's a syllable in the wind. Here's how to make it practical. Tonight, before bed, try this ritual. Close your eyes and replay your day as if watching from space. See your morning coffee spilled, the tense meeting, the unexpected bill, all unfolding on a tiny planet spinning in an indifferent universe. Notice how trivial most conflicts appear when stripped of their emotional packaging. The key isn't to belittle your experiences, but to recognize their true scale. Marcus called this seeing things as they are, not as they've been labeled. That argument with your partner, from a cosmic vantage point, it's two fragile beings trying to love each other amid life's chaos. This practice works because it engages both imagination and reason. Astronauts who have seen Earth from orbit often describe the overview effect, a profound shift in perspective where borders vanish and petty divisions seem absurd. You don't need a spacecraft to access this. The Stoic version is a mental lever prying you loose from tunnel vision. Next time you're fixated on a problem, pause and ask, how would this look to me 5 years from now? Or from the moon, the answer doesn't erase the issue, but it often reveals the weight you've added to it. There's a quiet humor in this exercise, too. Imagine your ancestors looking down at your distress over a Wi-Fi outage or a slow elevator. They'd marvel at the luxury of such problems. Marcus knew this. He'd write, "Soon you'll be dust or bones. Will this grudge matter then?" It sounds morbid, but it's oddly freeing. The meeting that felt life or death today becomes a footnote in your story. The insult that burned fades to a forgotten ember. What remains? Only what you chose to make meaningful, your integrity, your growth, the love you nurtured. The rest just scenery rushing past the window of a moving train. So tonight, when the day's noise still hums in your mind, try the view from above. Not to minimize your journey, but to see it whole, a single thread in a vast, shimmering tapestry. The stars won't judge your stumbles, the cosmos won't tally your wins, but you'll sleep lighter, knowing most storms are just weather passing through. Modern mindfulness often focuses on emptying the mind or observing thoughts like passing clouds. Stoic Prosoch, their version of attention, is more like a watchful gatekeeper, constantly discerning what deserves entry into your inner citadel. Epictetus captured this with piercing clarity. Don't let the future disturb you. You'll meet it with the same weapons of reason you wield today. Notice the difference. This isn't passive awareness, it's active discernment. A modern mindfulness app might guide you to notice your anger without judgment. Stoicism takes it further. Name it, interrogate it, disarm it. Here's how it works in practice. When frustration flares because your flight's delayed, instead of just noting, "I feel annoyed," a Stoic would label it as an impression, a mental sketch that hasn't yet been tested against reality. Epictetus taught his students to literally speak to their emotions like a philosopher cross-examining a shaky argument. Anger, you've arrived. What evidence do you have that this delay is truly harmful? Is my character so fragile that turbulence in plans breaks it? This mental noting isn't suppression. It's shining a light on the assumptions hiding beneath raw emotion. Imagine holding a snow globe. Modern mindfulness says, watch the flakes swirl. Stoicism adds, remember, you're holding the globe, not trapped inside it. That shift from being consumed by thoughts to holding them at arm's length changes everything. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind," he was describing prosoch, the discipline of selecting which thoughts earn residency in your mental space. Try this today. Next time a strong emotion arises, pause and prefix it with, I'm having the impression that my coworker disrespects me. I'm having the impression this traffic is unbearable. That tiny linguistic tweak creates critical distance. You're no longer drowning in the feeling, you're observing its contours. The Stoics knew what neuroscience now confirms. Labeling emotions reduces their intensity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm center. But here's where Stoicism diverges from generic mindfulness. Once you've noted the impression, you engage it with reason. Ask, is this within my control? If not, what's the cost of clutching it? A modern meditator might observe anxiety about a presentation. A Stoic would add, "This anxiety assumes the audience's opinion defines my worth. Does it? Prosoch isn't just awareness, it's awareness armed with a toolkit of challenging questions." Seneca demonstrated this with his nightly reviews. He'd revisit moments when impressions hijacked him, say, irritation at a noisy neighbor, and dissect them. Why did I grant that noise so much power? Was the silence I demanded a necessity or a preference? Over time, this practice rewires reactivity. The neighbor's laughter no longer triggers rage, it's just sound passing through the air. The delayed flight isn't an affront, it's an opportunity to practice patience. This takes training. Our minds are like overeager assistants, constantly interpreting events before we've consented. This is terrible. They meant to hurt me. Prosoch teaches you to intercept those snap judgments. Picture a journalist fact-checking their own headline before publication. Breaking news, my day is ruined. Really, by what standard, according to whom? The more you practice this pause, the quieter the false alarms become. Epictetus offered a metaphor. Life is a banquet, and impressions are dishes being passed. You're not obligated to taste every one. Modern mindfulness might say, notice the dish's aroma. Stoicism adds, and decide if it's nutritious before taking a bite. That's the heart of Prosoch, not just observing your mind's chatter, but curating it with the precision of a librarian deciding which books belong on the shelves. Some thoughts get archived, others return to sender unopened. Seneca called it retreating into yourself, not as escape but as homecoming. In a letter to his friend Lucilius, he described these moments of solitude as the soul's bath, a place where the grime of daily noise washes away, leaving only clarity. This isn't the loneliness we fear, that hollow ache of disconnection. Stoic solitude is something far richer, deliberate stillness where you meet yourself without the world's interruptions. Picture two ponds. One is constantly churned by passing boats, its waters muddy and unsettled. The other lies undisturbed, its surface so clear you can see every stone beneath. Your mind works the same way. Without space to settle, your thoughts stay murky. In stillness, they become transparent. History's greatest thinkers, from Michelangelo to Marie Curie, cultivated this habit. But Seneca's version wasn't about productivity hacks or creative breakthroughs. It was about reclaiming sovereignty over your attention. His letters reveal a man who'd regularly step away from Rome's chaos to ask himself, what have I absorbed today that isn't truly mine? What fears or desires did I adopt without consent? That's the power of solitude. It's where you audit your mental inventory, discarding borrowed beliefs like outgrown clothes. Modern life has confused solitude with idleness. We fill every spare second with podcasts, scrolling, background noise, as if silence were dangerous. Seneca would call this starving amid plenty. Your mind can't digest experiences without pauses between them. Imagine trying to eat a meal while someone force feeds you bite after bite. That's what constant stimulation does to your psyche. Stillness isn't empty space, it's the fertile ground where insight takes root. Here's the challenge: 10 minutes today, no phone, no distractions, just you and the raw material of your thoughts. Not meditation in the traditional sense, but what the Stoics called cessasis, a conscious withdrawal. Sit by a window, walk without earbuds, or simply stare at a candle flame. When your mind protests, this is wasting time. Recognize that voice as the addiction to noise talking. At first, it'll feel like staring at a blank canvas, but wait. Beneath the restlessness, you'll start noticing subtler textures, the way resentment from that meeting lingers like a sour taste, or how your chest tightens at memories you've avoided. These aren't distractions, they're the debris that needs clearing. Solitude becomes loneliness only when we expect it to fill us. The Stoic approach is different. you arrive empty-handed, asking nothing but to witness what's already there. Seneca wrote, "You must withdraw into yourself as far as possible, for the freest conversation is had with oneself. That conversation isn't always comfortable. You might meet the version of yourself that's been running on autopilot, making choices by habit rather than intent. But here's the secret: discomfort in solitude is often clarity in disguise. The things that nag at you in silence are usually the ones demanding your attention. Try this tonight. Before bed, steal 5 minutes, just 5, to sit with this question: what thought have I been avoiding today? Don't chase an answer. Let it surface like a leaf drifting to the top of a pond. Maybe it's a half-formed worry about money, or a quiet regret over words you wish you'd said. Observe it without judgment, as if you're reading a letter from a friend. That's Stoic stillness, not the absence of noise, but the presence of undistorted truth. The more you practice, the more you'll crave these pockets of quiet, not as escapes, but as reunions with the person you are when no one's watching. And when the world insists you're missing out by stepping away, remember Seneca's words: "No one is poorer than the man who cannot be alone." Your attention is the most sacred space you'll ever curate. Guard it like a sanctuary, and watch how clarity grows in the uncluttered corners. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who lived in the shadow of Nero's tyranny, had a radical idea about ego. We suffer not from the blows of fortune, but from the swelling of our own self-importance. Think about that for a moment. The sting of rejection, the heat of embarrassment, the gnawing fear of not measuring up, these aren't just reactions to the world. They're symptoms of an unchecked ego that mistakes its own reflection for reality. The bigger the ego, the more fragile it becomes, like a bubble trembling at the slightest touch. And here's the irony: the very thing we build to protect us, our self-image, becomes the source of our deepest wounds. This isn't about self-erasure or false modesty. Stoic humility is about accurate seeing. When Musonius taught his students to embrace hardship, sleeping on hard beds, eating simple food, enduring criticism, he wasn't punishing them. He was sanding down the ego's rough edges so they could meet life as it was, not as they demanded it to be. Imagine holding a cup underwater. The more you try to keep it filled with your own importance, the harder the water pushes back. Release your grip, and suddenly there's no struggle, just the natural buoyancy of things. That's the freedom humility offers, no longer exhausting yourself to prop up an image the world didn't ask for. Now consider how we typically measure ourselves against others' highlight reels. Social media has turned comparison into a blood sport, where we tally followers like points in a game we never agreed to play. The Stoics proposed a different metric: prosocial comparison. Instead of asking, "Am I as successful as them?" ask, "Am I wiser, kinder, more resilient than I was last year?" Seneca captured this in a letter: "What matters isn't how many books you own, but how many have rewritten your soul. Your past self is the only rival worth facing, because that's the only competition where growth is guaranteed to leave both parties stronger." Think of two gardeners. One obsesses over their neighbor's prize-winning roses, trimming their own bushes into anxious imitations. The other tends their plot with quiet focus, knowing soil and seasons can't be rushed. Which one wakes up lighter? The ego thrives on external benchmarks, titles, likes, someone else's idea of enough. Humility redirects that energy inward. Did I act with integrity today? Did I learn something that softened my edges? These questions don't just tame the ego, they liberate you from its endless hunger for validation. So where does your ego block self-acceptance? Maybe it's the voice that whispers you can't admit weakness when you're exhausted, or the part that twists every compliment into a future obligation. For Musonius, the test was simple: can you laugh at yourself, not the performative chuckle after a minor stumble, but the deep, unguarded mirth when you catch your ego in full costume, posing as a sage while tripping over its own robes. That laughter is the sound of the ego deflating to its proper size, leaving room for the real work, becoming who you are, not who you think you should be. The paradox: the less you need to be remarkable, the more remarkable your ordinary moments become. A conversation without posturing, a failure without shame. A quiet walk where you're not rehearsing your next achievement. That's the gift of taming the ego, not diminishing yourself, but finally meeting life without the filter of your own expectations. The world will keep its scorecards. You'll be too busy living to keep score. The Stoics mastered what modern psychologists now call the pause principle, that critical gap between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. Picture holding a cup of muddy water, shake it violently and the water churns, clouded with swirling sediment, but set it down, even for just a few moments, and the particles slowly settle, leaving the water clear again. Your mind works the same way. When insulted, when plans collapse, when life delivers one of its inevitable jolts, that first surge of emotion is like the shaken water, turbulent and opaque. The art lies in resisting the urge to act while the cup is still trembling. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming philosophy's most famous teacher, framed this as the discipline of assent. Before any emotion becomes action, he taught, there's a fleeting moment where you either approve or dismiss it. Imagine someone cuts you off in traffic. Your jaw clenches, your hands grip the wheel, that's the stimulus. But right there, in the split second before honking or shouting, exists a choice. Most people never notice it. They react like puppets jerked by invisible strings. The Stoic trains to widen that gap, to ask, will this response serve me, or is it just my ego demanding the last word? This isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about decoupling them from automatic reactions. Take insults, the ancient world's version of online trolling. When a Roman senator publicly mocked Cotto the Younger, calling him a drunkard, the crowd gasped. Cotto simply paused, then replied, I should thank you. If I'm not what you say, your lie doesn't harm me, and if I am, then your truth might help me. The insult didn't vanish, it lost its power to provoke. That's the pause in action, not denying the sting, but refusing to let it dictate your next move. Modern life tests this constantly. Your boss sends a curt email, your partner snaps after a long day. The instinct is to fire back, to set things right. But what if just once you treated that initial heat like the stirred sediment in the cup? Set it down, breathe. Watch how often the offense shrinks when deprived of your reaction. Seneca described this as winning by forfeit. When you refuse to engage, the conflict collapses under its own weight. Adaptability follows the same logic. Plans will derail, flights get cancelled, clients change their minds, rain soaks your picnic. The amateur rages against the disruption. The Stoic practices response flexibility, asking, what can I control here? My frustration or my next step? When Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, lost his entire fortune in a shipwreck, he didn't curse the waves. He wandered into an Athens bookstore, discovered philosophy, and built a legacy that outlasted any cargo. The wreckage wasn't his choice. What he salvaged from it was, try this today. Pick one trivial annoyance, a slow elevator, a misplaced key. When impatience flares, physically still your body, no sighing, no checking your watch. Notice how the emotion, when starved of outward expression, starts to dissolve. That's the pause at work. Over time, you'll catch bigger storms, the unfair critique, the betrayal, and find yourself reaching not for retaliation, but for clarity. Not because you've become indifferent, but because you've learned the most powerful response often looks like silence. The cup doesn't judge the hand that shakes it. It simply waits, trusting gravity to do its quiet work. Your mind, when trained in Stoic pause, can do the same, not by numbing itself to life's blows, but by knowing stillness is where wisdom rises. Seneca observed nature with a philosopher's eye and noticed something profound. No tree becomes rooted unless wind shakes it. Those gales that seem to threaten survival are the very forces that drive roots deeper, forging resilience you can't cultivate in calm weather. The Stoics didn't just tolerate imperfection, they revered it as the raw material of strength. Think of a blacksmith's forge. The blade isn't weakened by hammer strikes. Each blow aligns its structure, turning brittle metal into something that holds an edge. Your so-called flaws, they're not cracks in your foundation. They're the points where life has struck you and where you've learned to bend without breaking. Consider Cato the Younger, the Stoic who became a living lesson in embracing public stumbles. When he first addressed Rome's Senate, his voice shook so violently he was laughed off the podium. Most would have slunk away, branded by shame. Cato returned not after perfecting his oratory, but with the same trembling voice, the same awkward pauses. He let the world witness his struggle until his honesty, not his polish, became his power. Years later, when he spoke, even his enemies leaned in. Why? Because his imperfections weren't hidden, they were proof of his refusal to let discomfort dictate his worth. Modern culture sells us a lie. That mastery means erasing all traces of effort. Social media scrubs away the drafts, the sweat, the false starts, leaving only the illusion of seamless success. The Stoics called this out 2,000 years ago. Epictetus, born with a lame leg and sold into slavery, mocked the idea of waiting for perfection. If you're waiting until you're fearless to act, you'll die a coward. Growth doesn't happen in the safe harbor of polished performance. It happens in the messy space between "I can't" and "I did it anyway. Here's a practice." Grab a notebook and write down one trait you've labeled a flaw, maybe impatience, stubbornness, or shyness. Now flip the script. How might that same quality serve you? Impatience could be reframed as intolerance for wasted time, fueling productivity. Stubbornness becomes perseverance when channeled toward meaningful goals. Shyness, it's often the mark of a deep listener, the kind who hears what others miss. The Stoics weren't interested in erasing imperfections. They taught you to redeploy them. Like a gardener turning weeds into compost, you can transform perceived weaknesses into fuel. Marcus Aurelius left himself a reminder in his journals: the obstacle is the way. Not around the obstacle, not despite it, through it. That scratch in your record isn't a defect, it's the reason your voice has texture. The scar you hide is the map of a battle you survived. Even anxiety, that modern epidemic, carries Stoic wisdom. It's your body's ancient signal that something matters deeply. The question isn't how to silence it, but what it's trying to tell you. So next time you catch yourself apologizing for a stumble, tripping over words, needing extra time to learn, wearing your nervousness visibly, pause. Remember Cato's shaky speeches. Remember Seneca's trees standing taller because they weathered storms. Your imperfections aren't roadblocks on the path to peace, they're the path itself. The cracks are where the light gets in and where your unshakable strength takes root. Resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to suffer. A bitter truth the Stoics understood centuries before modern psychology confirmed it. Marcus Aurelius, who faced betrayal from allies and conspiracies within his own court, wrote in his private journal, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Notice what he's not saying. He doesn't advise pretending the hurt never happened or forcing hollow reconciliation. Stoic forgiveness isn't about the other person at all. It's about reclaiming your peace from the grip of someone who's already taken too much. History offers a striking example in the feud between Cicero and Julius Caesar. After Caesar's forces defeated Cicero's allies in Rome's civil war, the orator could have spent years plotting vengeance. Instead, he chose what the Stoics would call indifference, not to the injustice, but to its power over his mind. He wrote, "I will not let my enemies write the script of my life." By refusing to let bitterness dictate his actions, Cicero preserved his ability to advocate for justice without becoming consumed by it. The irony, Caesar, who expected hatred, found himself disarmed by Cicero's refusal to play the expected role of resentful foe. Here's the paradox: resentment feels like holding someone accountable, but it often does the opposite. When you replay an old hurt, the person who wronged you isn't suffering, you are. Epictetus, who endured slavery before teaching philosophy, framed this as a simple equation. Does your anger improve the situation? If not, who's truly in chains? That's the Stoic pivot from "they hurt me" to "how much longer will I let this hurt me?" Try this practice tonight. Take a sheet of paper and write a letter to the person or situation you resent. Pour out every raw detail, the betrayal, the unfairness, the lingering sting. Then, instead of sending it, light a match and watch the flames turn your grievance to ash. This isn't theatrical symbolism, it's neuroscience in action. Studies show that physical acts of release, burning, tearing, even throwing away paper, signal the brain to categorize emotional weight as processed. The Stoic version goes one step further. As the smoke rises, ask yourself, what's the cost of carrying this, and what could I build with that energy instead? Marcus Aurelius left himself a daily reminder: you've outlived many who wished you harm, now outlive their impact on your soul. Forgiveness in this light isn't weakness. It's the ultimate power move, declaring that your peace is no longer negotiable. The person who wronged you may never change, but you're free to grow beyond the version of yourself they once wounded. That's how resentment dies, not with a final confrontation, but with the quiet realization that you've got better things to carry. Stoic gratitude isn't just counting your blessings, it's feeling them with the intensity of someone who's lost and regained them. Imagine waking up one morning to find your hands numb, your legs unresponsive. The ordinary act of lifting a coffee cup would suddenly feel like a miracle. That's the Stoic practice, not taking the mundane for granted, but savoring it as if it's been momentarily stolen and then returned. Seneca called this rehearsing loss to amplify gratitude. While negative visualization prepares you for hardship, its twin positive premeditation prepares you to fully inhabit the gifts you already hold. Take something as simple as a hot shower. Most of us rush through it, mentally drafting to-do lists. But what if you pause to feel the water like a traveler who's spent weeks in the desert? The steam rising, the warmth seeping into your muscles. These aren't just sensations, they're fleeting privileges. The Stoics would remind you, 2,000 years ago, even emperors didn't have this luxury. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." He wasn't offering poetic fluff. He was prescribing a daily ritual to counteract the human tendency to normalize comfort. This practice deepens when applied to relationships. Hierocles, a lesser-known Stoic, introduced the concept of circles of concern, layers of connection radiating outward from self to family, community, and ultimately all humanity. His exercise: mentally draw those circles closer. The barista who remembers your order isn't just a service worker, they're part of the intricate web that makes your day smoother. Your co-worker's patience, your neighbor's wave, these aren't background noise. They're threads in a fabric you'd instantly miss if it unraveled. Try this tonight. Sit with a single routine moment, a child's laugh, the weight of a blanket, the smell of dinner, and mentally fast forward to a world where it's gone. Then snap back to the present. Notice how the ordinary suddenly shimmers. The Stoics weren't teaching us to dwell on loss, but to defy the dullness of habit. Gratitude, in this light, isn't passive appreciation. It's an active rebellion against taking life for granted. And here's the secret. This practice doesn't just soften the blow of future loss. It transforms the present into something richer. That conversation you barely listened to. It's a dialogue you'll one day wish you could replay. The ache in your knees after a long walk. Proof you're alive in a body that still carries you. Even frustration becomes fuel because the job that tests your patience is also the one that feeds your family. The Stoics didn't chase happiness, they uncovered it layer by layer in the raw material of their imperfect, ordinary lives. So next time you catch yourself glossing over the small joys, the way sunlight slants through a window, the hum of a refrigerator that means you have food, pause. Ask, if this vanished tomorrow, what would I give to have it back for just 5 minutes? The answer isn't just gratitude. It's a way of living that turns every day into a reunion with gifts you've learned to truly see. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who walked with a limp from childhood, once faced a student's pity over his lameness. His response, "If I try to escape my condition, then I'm truly lame." At first glance, it sounds like resignation, but dig deep, or it's a masterclass in redefining success. He wasn't praising suffering, he was exposing the deeper disability, the belief that wholeness depends on circumstances aligning perfectly. Modern hustle culture preaches the opposite, that relentless striving toward external milestones will somehow make us invincible. But what happens when the promotion doesn't come, the launch underperforms, or the body betrays us? We don't just feel disappointment, we feel erased, as if our worth was tied to an outcome that slipped through our fingers. The Stoic alternative measures success by the integrity of your effort, not the fickleness of results. Arrian's account of Epictetus's lameness reveals the core paradox. Our attempts to outrun limitations often magnify them. A marathon runner obsessed with podium finishes might miss the joy of strong legs carrying them mile after mile. An artist fixated on virality might forget the quiet thrill of brush meeting canvas. Epictetus's limp wasn't his flaw. His flaw was believing he needed to hide it to be whole. Modern hustle culture sells us the same lie, that we must grind ourselves into polished, painless versions of ourselves to matter. But burnout isn't a badge of honor. It's the body's rebellion against a definition of success that leaves no room for being human. Consider two entrepreneurs. One judges their worth by quarterly profits, riding the roller coaster of wins and losses like a life or death battle. The other focuses on solving meaningful problems, knowing some ideas will flourish while others teach hard lessons. Both face setbacks, but only one measures their value by inputs. Did I act with courage? Did I learn rather than outputs? The Stoics called this prohersis, the realm of intentional choice, the only terrain where true success or failure can ever exist. Everything else, just weather passing through. The irony of hustle culture is how closely it mirrors the lameness Epictetus refused to indulge. Scrolling through curated success stories, we're told to rise and grind while quietly absorbing the message, "You're not enough as you are." Stoicism flips this script. What if the relentless pursuit of more isn't ambition, but a kind of spiritual lameness, a hobbled belief that you must constantly escape your present state to deserve peace? Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet his journal entries fixate not on conquests, but on showing up with discipline each day. Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. B1. Practical application. Audit your metrics. Next time you set a goal, pair it with a virtuous intention, a Stoic checkpoint. I'll train for this marathon to honor my body's resilience, not to prove I'm tough. I'll grow my business to serve, not to silence my insecurity. When outcomes disappoint, return to that intention like a compass. Epictetus's limp didn't vanish when he stopped resenting it. It simply ceased to be the central story of his life. Your struggles, whether failed ventures, missed targets, or sheer exhaustion, don't define you unless you let them. Hustle culture thrives on the myth of arrival, that one day, after enough hustle, you'll finally be enough. Stoicism whispers the truth: you already are, not because you've earned it, but because your capacity to choose with virtue exists now, limp and all. The race doesn't end when you cross the finish line. It ends when you realize you were never running against anyone but the version of yourself that still believed it had to. The Stoics saw nature not as scenery to admire from a distance, but as a mirror reflecting our deepest truths and a teacher showing us how to live. When Cleans, the second leader of the Stoic school, penned his hymn to Zeus, he wasn't writing poetry. He was mapping a path to peace. "Lead me, O Zeus, along the path you've set," he wrote, "for I will follow without hesitation. Even if I resist, I must still obey the universal law." That's Stoic cosmopolitanism in action, recognizing you're not just in nature, but of it, a single note in a symphony that's been playing since the stars first burned. Walk through any forest after a storm and you'll find the real lessons. See how the birch tree, bent nearly double by winter winds, doesn't waste energy cursing the gales. It adapts. Its trunk grows gnarled where the pressure was greatest. Its roots dig deeper where the soil was loosened. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the interconnectedness of all things. Your struggles aren't isolated events. They're part of a vast, resilient system where even broken branches become compost for new growth. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What harms the hive harms the bee," he wasn't just describing ecology. He was reminding us that fighting against life's currents exhausts us, while flowing with them teaches us strength. Modern life tricks us into believing we're separate from each other, from the earth, even from our own bodies. We build routines under fluorescent lights, measure success by pixels on screens, and wonder why we feel untethered. The Stoics prescribed a literal return to ground, walks without headphones, hands in soil, eyes tracing the patterns of birds in flight. Not as escapism, but as recalibration. When Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, lost his fortune at sea, he didn't just stumble into philosophy. He found it while wandering the Athenian coastline, watching how waves reshaped the shore without resentment. Nature doesn't mourn what it loses, it transforms it. Try this today. Find a tree that survived against odds, one split by lightning or growing through cracks in concrete. Place your palm against its bark and consider how many storms it's weathered to stand here now. That's not metaphor, it's physics. The same laws that shape its growth apply to your resilience. Every setback that's ever bent you has also, invisibly, been strengthening your core. Clean's hymn wasn't about passive surrender to fate. It was about aligning your will with the same forces that turn acorns into oaks and rivers into canyons. The cosmos doesn't distinguish between good and bad events, it simply unfolds. A flood destroys a village but nourishes a delta. A forest fire clears dead wood so new seeds can sprout. Stoic peace comes when we stop labeling life's twists as personal affronts and start seeing them as part of a pattern too vast for our momentary judgments. Next time you feel small against life's chaos, remember, the same force that carves mountains also carved you. Your breath is the wind, your heartbeat is the tide. And your capacity to endure, that's the oldest wisdom of all, written in every root that refuses to let go. Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a barrel and carried a lamp in broad daylight, wasn't just an eccentric, he was a living challenge to society's endless hunger for more. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man on earth, asked what he could do for him, Diogenes didn't request riches or favors. He simply said, "Step aside, you're blocking my sunlight." That moment captures Stoic enoughness in its purest form, the realization that the things we chase often obscure the light we already have. Consumerism tells us happiness lives in the next purchase, the next upgrade, the next milestone. Stoicism whispers it's already here in the space between wanting and having. The lamp Diogenes carried wasn't just a prop. He claimed to be searching for an honest man, someone free from the illusions of status and accumulation. But the deeper truth, he was demonstrating how little a person truly needs to be free. While Athens bustled with merchants selling silks and spices, Diogenes owned nothing but his cloak, his staff, and that lamp. Yet history remembers him not as deprived but as unshackled. His poverty wasn't a lack, it was a deliberate clearing away of everything that couldn't survive the light of his scrutiny. Modern life inverts this. We're trained to see desires as markers of identity. I want, therefore I am. Social media amplifies this, turning envy into an algorithm-fed habit. A new phone isn't just a tool, it's a signal. A vacation isn't just rest, it's a performance. The Stoics called this prolepsis, the habit of mistaking cultural conditioning for genuine need. Seneca saw through it. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. The difference between Diogenes' lamp and our glowing screens isn't technology. It's the question we've forgotten to ask: does this serve my freedom or my bondage? Here's the challenge. For 1 week, conduct a want vs need audit. Keep a notebook handy, and every time you reach for your wallet or feel that itch of "I should buy," pause. Ask 1. Is this a need or a want? Food is a need. Gourmet truffles are a want. 2. What story am I telling myself about why I must have this? Does it promise status? Comfort, escape. 3. How would I feel if I never owned it? Often, the anticipation outlives the joy of possession. You'll start noticing patterns, like how boredom masquerades as hunger for new things, or how fear of missing out pushes you toward purchases that leave you emptier. The goal isn't deprivation, but discernment. The Stoics didn't reject all possessions, they rejected possession by possessions. Marcus Aurelius, despite his imperial wealth, wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life." He understood that enough isn't a quantity, it's a relationship with yourself. Imagine your life as a house. Consumerism keeps adding rooms, each one demanding furniture, maintenance, and protection. Stoicism asks, how many of these rooms do you actually live in? Diogenes' barrel was small, but his world was vast, uncluttered by the weight of things he didn't love or need. Your version of enough might include more than a barrel, but the principle holds. Every unchecked desire is a brick in a wall you'll eventually have to climb over to see the sky. By week's end, your audit won't just reveal spending habits. It'll expose the quiet myths you've absorbed, that more choices mean more freedom, that accumulation equals security. The lamp you carry now isn't for finding an honest man out there. It's for illuminating the honest truth in here, that you've always had the light. You just forgot sometimes to let it be enough. Building emotional resilience isn't about dodging life's blows. It's about learning to stand so firmly in your own center that no storm can uproot you. The Stoics called this Amor Fati in action, not just accepting fate, but bending it into a forge where your strength is tempered. Take Seneca, Rome's wealthiest philosopher, who was exiled to Corsica's barren cliffs under false accusations. Most would have crumbled, railing against the injustice, but Seneca, He turned that exile into a creative rebirth, writing letters that became timeless works of philosophy and finding solace in the island's wild beauty. In his words, a setback is an opportunity to begin again more intelligently. That's resilience, not immunity to pain, but the alchemy that transforms it into wisdom. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics practiced. Resilience isn't an innate trait. It's a muscle built through stress inoculation. Just as vaccines introduce weakened viruses to strengthen immunity, small, voluntary discomforts prepare you for life's inevitable shocks. The ancients had their version sleeping on hard beds, fasting intermittently, enduring cold baths. Today, you might start with a cold shower instead of reaching for the thermostat, or take the stairs when the elevator's tempting. These aren't masochistic exercises, they're rehearsals for moments when life forces discomfort upon you. When you willingly step into minor hardships, you rewrite your relationship with adversity. It's no longer an enemy to flee, but a teacher showing you your own capacity. Think of a willow tree in a hurricane. Its flexibility isn't weakness, it's the secret to surviving winds that snap rigid oaks. Resilience works the same way. Epictetus, who endured slavery before teaching emperors, framed it as the art of making obstacles fuel. When you voluntarily face small struggles, skipping the snooze button, sitting with boredom instead of grabbing your phone, you're training your mind to stay supple under pressure. The goal isn't to eliminate discomfort, but to prove to yourself again and again that you can move through it. Here's the paradox: by seeking out tiny hardships, you disarm the big ones. A study on Navy SEAL found that those who embraced discomfort in training, voluntarily pushing past exhaustion, hunger, or cold, performed better under real stress. Their secret: they'd learned to separate sensation from suffering. The Stoics called this propatheia, catching the first spark of distress before it becomes a wildfire. When you practice waking up early on weekends, you're not just building discipline, you're teaching your nervous system that discomfort doesn't equal danger. That's why Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The obstacle isn't the problem, your resistance to it is." Try this today. Pick one voluntary discomfort. Leave your jacket unzipped in chilly weather. Walk past the snack aisle without stopping. Sit in silence for 5 minutes without distractions. Notice how your mind reacts: the itch to escape, the stories it spins about why you shouldn't have to endure this. That's the noise resilience quietens. Over time, these small acts compound into an unshakable knowing. You've faced harder, and you're still here. Seneca's exile didn't break him, it revealed him. Your struggles, big or small, can do the same, not by vanishing, but by showing you the strength you've been cultivating all along. The cold shower isn't just water, it's a whisper: you are tougher than you think. And the next time life turns the temperature down without asking, you'll already know the truth. Portia Cotto, daughter of the famed Stoic Cotto the Younger, didn't just study philosophy, she bled for it. When her husband Brutus joined the conspiracy to assassinate Caesar, she proved her trustworthiness in the most visceral way possible, by stabbing herself in the thigh and enduring the pain without flinching. Later, when Brutus hesitated to confide in her, she pointed to the wound and said, "I am not the daughter of Cotto if I cannot bear secrets." This wasn't performative toughness. It was courage distilled, the kind that comes not from ignoring pain, but from choosing purpose over comfort. While modern celebrity culture sells us curated images of perfection, filtered, airbrushed, and pain-free, Portia's story reminds us that true strength isn't about looking invincible. It's about embracing the wounds that come with living by principle. Then there's Agrippinus, the Stoic teacher who received news of his exile while hosting a dinner party. His response, "Very well, we shall dine in Arisha instead." No outrage, no frantic packing, just an adjustment of plans, as if relocating were no more disruptive than moving to another table. Compare that to the modern spectacle of public figures melting down over cancelled flights or negative reviews. Agrippinus embodied what the Stoics called euthymia, a cheerful tranquility that treats adversity like weather, neither personal nor permanent. His secret: he'd spent years practicing negative visualization, mentally rehearsing loss until real-life setbacks lost their sting. While influencers today chase the next dopamine hit of likes and accolades, Agrippinus found freedom in detachment, not from life's joys but from the desperation to cling to them. These figures offer a mirror to our own times. Portia's courage wasn't reckless, it was measured. She didn't seek suffering, but she refused to let fear veto her convictions. Agrippinus's cheerfulness wasn't naivety. It was the hard-won fruit of daily mental training. Contrast that with the fragility of viral fame, where reputations shatter over single missteps and self-worth fluctuates with algorithm whims. The Stoics didn't have social media, but they understood the trap of external validation. Epictetus warned, "If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters." Portia and Agrippinus lived this, prioritizing inner integrity over outer approval. So who in your life embodies this quiet resilience? Maybe it's the grandmother who nursed her husband through dementia without losing her humor, or the co-worker who treats layoffs as redirections rather than rejections. Stoic role models aren't just marble statues from antiquity. They're people who have mastered the art of bending without breaking. Look for those who meet hardship with curiosity instead of complaint, who measure their worth by their choices rather than their circumstances. Their lives are living proof that peace isn't the absence of storms, it's the skill of sailing through them with a steady hand. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, had a radical teaching about speech that most of us never master. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. At first glance, it sounds like simple etiquette, but dig deeper. This isn't just about politeness. It's about recognizing how often our words dilute our peace. The Stoics called this taciturnity, the discipline of speaking only when silence would be inferior. Not the awkward silence of disinterest, but the rich quiet between thoughts where understanding grows. Imagine a pond after a storm. The silt settles, the water clears, and suddenly you can see all the way to the bottom. That's what happens when you stop churning the waters with unnecessary speech. Consider how often we speak to fill voids: nervous chatter in elevators, rehearsed opinions in meetings, or the compulsive need to correct someone who's factually wrong but emotionally committed. Each time we trade presence for performance. Seneca observed this in Rome's elite, noting how their constant posturing left them exhausted. Their words outnumber their thoughts. The modern equivalent, scrolling to craft the perfect comment, or jumping to share an anecdote instead of absorbing someone's story. Taciturnity isn't muteness. It's the art of measuring words like precious currency, spending them only where they'll yield real connection or clarity. Here's the practice. Try a day of intentional listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk, but truly receiving. When a colleague vents, resist the urge to fix or one-up their problem. When a friend shares joy, don't dilute it by pivoting to your own. Even in conflict, pause. The Stoics knew that anger often crumbles when deprived of oxygen. Epictetus advised, silence is a lesson learned through the harshest words. Next time you're baited into an argument, experiment with dropping the rope. Watch how the tension deflates when you refuse to tug back. History offers a masterclass in this. Cato the Younger, known for his unshakable principles, was equally famous for his pauses. When provoked in the Senate, he'd let insults hang in the air until the speaker grew uneasy under their own echo. His silence wasn't passive, it was a mirror forcing others to confront the emptiness of their words. Contrast that with today's outrage cycles where instant reactions leave no room for reflection. The Stoic alternative: let every word pass three gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Does it improve upon silence? The rewards are profound. In quiet, you start hearing subtler frequencies, the hesitation in a loved one's voice that reveals unspoken worry, or the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to prove themselves. Musonius Rufus taught that we learn philosophy by applying it, not by debating it. Try this tonight. Share a meal without narrating your day. Let the clink of cutlery and the weight of shared presence say what words cannot. You'll discover what the Stoics knew, that some truths are only audible when we stop speaking. Envy is one of the few emotions that can simultaneously burn and freeze you, a corrosive mix of admiration and resentment that leaves you stuck between wanting what someone else has and resenting them for having it. The Stoics, ever the alchemists of human emotion, proposed an alternative: prosocial envy, the practice of turning that heat into fuel for your own growth. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, put it bluntly: choose someone whose life pleases you and carry their model in your heart. Notice what he's not saying. He doesn't advise coveting their success or tearing them down to soothe your ego. He's prescribing a radical reframe. Envy isn't a vice to suppress, but a signal pointing you toward qualities you've neglected in yourself. Think of it like seeing a breathtaking garden. The amateur gardener fumes. Why don't my roses look like that? The Stoic asks, what soil, sunlight, and care created those blooms, and how can I apply those principles to my own plot? The difference isn't semantics, it's strategy. Resentment paralyzes, emulation activates. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus studied his rival Hannibal's tactics, he didn't seethe over the Carthaginians' brilliance, he dissected it. What made Hannibal's ambushes so effective? How could he adapt that ingenuity without copying it outright? By the time they met at Zoma, Scipio had turned his envy into a mastery that changed history. Here's how to practice this today. First, identify the itch when you feel envy prickling. Pause and name it. Is it their discipline, their creativity, their calm under pressure? Then, conduct a virtue extraction. Imagine you're a scientist isolating a compound from a plant. What specific trait, stripped of its context, could you cultivate in your own way? If you envy a colleague's public speaking skills, the goal isn't to mimic their style, but to identify the root. Maybe they excel at storytelling, or they've mastered the art of pausing for impact. Those are skills you can study, adapt, and make your own. Seneca's letters reveal a man who turned this into a daily habit. When he envied a philosopher's eloquence, he didn't sulk. He analyzed their techniques, then wrote more. When he admired a statesman's patience, he drilled himself in delay, sitting with discomfort until it became endurance. His envy wasn't erased, it was repurposed. Modern research backs this. Studies on benign envy show it boosts performance when channeled into self-improvement rather than spite. The key lies in shifting from "why them" to "how can I grow toward that?" Try this tonight. Pick one person you've reflexively compared yourself to, a friend, a peer, even a historical figure. Write down 3 traits they embody that stir that uneasy mix of awe and frustration. Now design a micro-challenge to cultivate one. If it's their discipline, commit to waking 30 minutes earlier for a week. If it's their generosity, leave an anonymous gift for a neighbor. The action itself matters less than the mindset. You're not competing with them, but collaborating with their example to refine your own potential. Marcus Aurelius left himself a reminder in his journals. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Flip that logic. The best envy is to become like the one who inspired it, not in their triumphs, but in the virtues that made those triumphs possible. The garden you admire didn't grow overnight, neither will yours, but every time you trade resentment for emulation, you're planting seeds whose roots will outlast the fleeting heat of jealousy. Marcus Aurelius ended his days not with mindless scrolling or last-minute emails, but with a practice so simple it revolutionized his sleep and his sanity. His journals reveal a nightly ritual. What did I do well today as a human being? Where did I fall short? Not a passive replay of events, but an active audit of character. This wasn't self-criticism, it was calibration. Imagine a blacksmith inspecting their tools at day's end, not to lament the nicks, but to ensure the blade stays true. Modern science now confirms what Marcus intuited. This kind of structured reflection lowers cortisol and signals the brain to transition from doing to resting. A Harvard study found that just 15 minutes of journaling before bed reduces nighttime wakefulness by silencing the mental chatter that hijacks sleep. But the Stoics added a twist we often miss. After reviewing the day, Marcus would give tomorrow's burdens back to tomorrow. He practiced what modern therapists call cognitive offloading, transferring unresolved worries from your mind to paper. Here's how it works. Keep a notebook by your bed. When anxieties surface, a looming deadline, an awkward conversation you need to have, write them down in a command format. Decide on the project timeline by 10 a.m. Apologize to Sarah for the interruption. This tricks your brain into believing the task has been delegated, freeing your subconscious from its vigil. Sleep researchers at Baylor University discovered that people who jot down to-do lists before bed fall asleep 9 minutes faster than those who journal about completed tasks. The difference: unfinished thoughts create open loops in the mind. Closing them with concrete instructions tells your psyche, this is handled. The brilliance lies in pairing these two practices. First, the Stoic review grounds you in what was, acknowledging progress and course corrections without judgment. Then, the mental declutter prepares you for what will be, not with vague dread, but with actionable steps. Picture a ship's captain logging the day's voyage before plotting the next day's course. There's clarity in the sequence: reflect, then release. Seneca described this as settling your accounts daily, a metaphor that resonates with modern financial therapy principles. Just as balancing a checkbook prevents fiscal anxiety, balancing your mental ledger prevents existential debt from compounding overnight. Try this tonight. Set a 3-minute timer for your review. For 1 minute, note one thing you navigated with integrity, maybe patience with a frustrating coworker or resisting an unhealthy craving. Spend the next minute on where you strayed from your values, perhaps snapping at a loved one or procrastinating. No guilt, just observation. I did this. Next time I'll try that. Then grab a separate page and brain dump every nagging thought in the form of future commands. Research daycare options at lunch. Email the contractor about the leak. Fold the page and place it across the room, a physical act that reinforces mental delegation. The Stoics understood what sleep labs now measure. The mind needs rituals to shift gears. Your phone's blue light isn't the only sleep thief. It's the unchecked thoughts ricocheting in your skull. Marcus didn't have LED screens, but he knew the tyranny of the untended mind. His remedy: structure. Not rigid self-judgment, but the kind of orderly reflection that turns chaos into clarity. Tonight, when the world tells you to binge one more episode or doom scroll, remember, the most rebellious act might be closing your eyes, but only after you've told your mind, in no uncertain terms, shift complete. Anchor dropped, tomorrow can wait. Seneca's warning that life is long if you know how to use it takes on urgent meaning in the age of infinite scrolling. Imagine if we treated our attention like currency. Would we still hand over hours of our day for fleeting dopamine hits? The average person now spends over 4 years of their life on social media. That's not just time lost, it's self-lost fragments of your one irreplaceable life traded for algorithmic whispers. Digital Stoicism begins with a simple but radical shift, seeing screens not as neutral tools, but as attention markets where your focus is the product being sold. Start with an attention audit, no fancy apps required. For 1 week, carry a small notebook and jot down every digital interaction like a Stoic accountant. 9 am 20 minutes comparing vacations I can't afford. Noon, 45 minutes debating strangers about politics that leave me drained. 3 p.m., rabbit hole of celebrity gossip that leaves a sour aftertaste. The goal isn't shame, it's pattern recognition. Just as Musonius Rufus taught his students to examine their physical diets, we must dissect our mental consumption. When you see in ink what you've been consuming in pixels, a startling truth emerges. Much of your scrolling isn't relaxation. It's spiritual fast food, convenient, addictive, and ultimately malnourishing. Now apply Stoic scrolling. Before tapping any app, channel Epictetus' Discipline of Ascent. Pause and ask, does this serve my tranquility or fracture it? Not in the abstract, but with concrete criteria. Will this expand my understanding like a documentary or thoughtful essay? Deepen a real connection, a heartfelt message instead of passive likes. Restore me guided meditation over rage-inducing comments. Treat your thumb hovering over the icon like a Stoic archer drawing their bow. Is this shot aimed with intention or just another reflexive twitch? Here's the paradox. Technology isn't the enemy, mindlessness is. Seneca himself wrote letters daily, using technology, quill and parchment to cultivate wisdom. The difference, he dictated terms to his tools rather than surrendering to their pull. Try scheduled depth. Designate 30-minute blocks for deliberate digital use, reading philosophy essays, learning a skill, or video calling someone who sharpens your thinking. Outside those windows, your phone becomes a single-purpose tool. Maps, messages, music, not a slot machine for your attention. The final test comes when you notice that itch to scroll idly. That's not boredom, it's withdrawal from the constant stimulation you've been sold as normal. Sit with the discomfort instead of numbing it. In those quiet moments, you'll hear something profound, your own mind, untethered from the digital current, remembering what it means to think rather than react. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, nowhere can you retreat more peacefully than your own soul, even especially when that soul isn't holding a phone. Stoicism often gets mislabeled as a solitary pursuit, some image of a lone thinker, arms crossed against the world, detached from the messiness of human connection. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics weren't hermits, they were architects of community, deeply invested in the idea that inner peace flourishes when rooted in service to others. Hierocles, a lesser-known but brilliant Stoic teacher, illustrated this with his circles of concern exercise. Picture a series of concentric rings. At the center, you. The next ring holds your family, then friends, neighbors, countrymen, and finally, all humanity. His practice mentally draw those circles closer. The stranger becomes a neighbor, the neighbor becomes kin. This wasn't abstract idealism, it was cognitive training to dissolve the illusion of separation. When you see yourself as part of an interconnected whole, your peace is no longer a private possession, it becomes a shared resource. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, never lost sight of this truth. His famous line, "What's bad for the hive is bad for the bee," wasn't poetic garnish. It was a daily reminder that individual tranquility depends on collective well-being. Think of a beehive where one bee hoards all the pollen, the colony starves, and eventually so does the hoarder. Modern life tempts us to build taller fences and curate smaller social circles, mistaking isolation for independence. But Stoicism argues the opposite. Your resilience grows when you invest in the resilience of others. A community that shares wisdom, resources, and compassion isn't just nice to have, it's the bedrock of lasting peace. This leads to Stoic reciprocity, not the transactional, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, but the virtuous kind where giving and receiving flow naturally like breath. Imagine a potluck where everyone brings what they can and takes what they need. No scorekeeping, no guilt, just mutual nourishment. The Stoics practiced this through catalepsis, the art of withholding judgment so you can truly see others' needs. When a friend vents instead of asking for advice, they're not wasting your time. They're offering you the chance to practice patience. When a stranger's car breaks down and you stop to help, you're not sacrificing your peace. You're reinforcing it by affirming your place in the human web. Consider the paradox of the Stoic sage. The more they cultivate inner stillness, the more they're compelled to engage with the world. Epictetus, who taught in the crowded streets of Athens, didn't retreat to a mountaintop. He turned every interaction into a lesson in shared humanity. His classroom had no walls because he understood that peace isn't found by avoiding life's chaos, but by bringing order to it, one act of kindness, one moment of understanding at a time. So where does this leave the modern seeker of Stoic peace? Start small. Next time you're tempted to mute a contentious group chat or look away from a neighbor's struggle, ask, what would it cost me to lean in? Not with savior complex, but with quiet solidarity. Carry groceries for the elderly man on your block. Listen, really listen, to the coworker everyone avoids. These aren't distractions from your inner work, they're the very practice of it. The Stoic path was never meant to be walked alone. It's a bridge between you and the world, between peace and purpose. And every step taken together makes the crossing lighter. We've traveled far together from the storms of self-doubt to the stillness of Stoic clarity. But let's gather the tools that will anchor you long after this video ends. It all rests on three pillars: self-acceptance, the radical embrace of your path as it is Ammer Fati; clarity, the razor-sharp discernment between what's yours to shape and what's not, the dichotomy of control; and action, the daily choice to align with virtue even when it costs you comfort. These aren't just ideas, they're the scaffolding of unshakable peace. Epictetus gave us the blueprint 2,000 years ago. First say what you'd be, then do what you have to do. That's the Stoic method in one line. Define your character not in vague aspirations but in concrete terms. I am someone who meets chaos with calm. I am someone who turns obstacles into fuel. Then act as if you're already that person, not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, now. In the traffic jam, the tense meeting, the quiet loneliness before sleep. Every moment is a chance to rehearse the person you're becoming. To bridge theory and practice, I challenge you to a 30-day Stoic journal sprint, not a diary of events, but a forge for your character. Each evening, ask 3 questions. 1. Where did I practice Amor Fati today? Did I resent a disruption or find its hidden gift? 2. Where did I confuse what's mine with what isn't? Did I waste energy on someone else's opinion or a delay I couldn't fix? 3. What virtue did I strengthen or neglect? Did I choose courage over comfort? Wisdom over reaction. This isn't about perfection. It's about pattern recognition. Like Marcus Aurelius scribbling in his tent, you're not judging yourself, you're training yourself. The page doesn't lie. Over 30 days, you'll spot the gaps between your ideals and your actions, not to shame yourself, but to close them. If this resonated with you, join our community. Hit subscribe for weekly deep dives. We dissect Stoic texts, troubleshoot modern struggles, and turn philosophy into lived experience. Because wisdom isn't a single video or quote. It's the daily work of building a life that no storm can shake. Epictetus started as a slave. Marcus ruled an empire. Their circumstances couldn't have been more different, but their tool was the same: the unyielding choice to meet life as it is, not as they wished it to be. That power isn't ancient history. It's here, in your hands, waiting for your first sentence in that journal. The rest, that's your